Jane set the scene beautifully, looking at it in its broadest context. And now I have the challenge to focus down on an individual species and then understand its implications for all this engineering across Europe. So the title is Trying to Prevent Extinction. It is more endangered than the tiger, the panda, the snow leopard. They're endangered. This is one higher, critically endangered. Yet, here in Poland, you love eating it. Yes? Do you know how many you buy in each year? Somewhere between 5 and 10 million. Because the natural recruitment to Poland is very, very, very few. So I can tell you the story of the eel and relate it to this river and this project. It's all about a collaboration. This is the point. Okay, we have a crisis. What are we going to do about it? Collaboration is the only way. So the crisis. This is what the scientists say, and you have this crash. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, eel was 50% of the biomass of all freshwater fish in Europe. So we still have millions and millions of them, but it's from superabundance to great, great reduction. So, yes, we've managed to get some little improvements from the work in the last few years, but we are miles away from solving this problem. So when you think about the eel, you have to think about the northern hemisphere. Eels, we think, are born in the Sargasso Sea. They float across the Atlantic to the west-facing rivers of Europe, and then they occupy Europe and North Africa, a vast area. think hemispheric. It's one stock. The next thing is it has this incredibly complex life cycle, and I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but we really don't understand it. Man has never seen the eel breed. Millions of pounds is being spent trying to get it to breed in captivity, and they can't get them to survive past 20 days. It's full of mystery. This historic abundance has lent it food for everyone, from the pyramids to today. Eel is a very popular dish, and of course it's now wanted in huge numbers in Asia, and they will pay €0.50 per baby eel. €0.50 per baby. So lots of competition and conflict. And then this greed. Economic activity, unthought, creates all sorts of destructions. Now, the eel is listed at CITES to control the trade. It is critically endangered, and it's a flagship species by IUCN. And it has the European Eel Recovery Regulation. So every country in Europe has an eel management plan trying to bring about a recovery. So it's extraordinary what is being done to try and save this species. Now, the cause is manifold, but blocked migration pathways in is one of the big issues. The eels can't get up the rivers because of the dams and the barriers. This is France, 75,000 barriers on that map. Jane was talking earlier about the Netherlands, the most engineered landscape in Europe. Here's a map of Spain. The blue is where the eels weren't 100 years ago, and the blue is where the eels aren't today. It is an extraordinary problem, this getting in, the migration in. Most of the eels arrive in the Bay of Biscay. Something like 70% arrive in the Bay of Biscay. Where I come from on the Severn in the UK, it's just a small percentage. But all over there are these concrete walls and steel doors. 50s of years ago they were made of wood, and the eels would wriggle round, enough would get through, the wood rotted. Not me. But now steel doors, concrete walls, just can't get through. And if they've got through and they've grown up and they're now trying to swim back to the Sargasso Sea off Bermuda to breed, they have to get through water pumps and hydro turbines, and these are the big girls, the big female eels, probably been in the rivers for 20 years or so, this big, carrying 2 or 3 million eggs. And this is a pile slashed as it's attempted to migrate through the turbines of hydropower. Terrible, terrible destruction. That is the seed corn of the future. You kill those eels, you stop them getting back to breed. So killing them at that point is like the most critical phase. This is what a big water pump looks like. There are tens of thousands of them killing eels. There are 25,000 hydropower stations in Europe. Poland is near the top with 700. And many, many more are being planned. Now, we all want energy, but how do we make our hydros work for the eel and migratory fish, as well as for our energies? This is the scientists reporting from the eel regulation, trying to show where the biggest mortality is. And the red is in proportion, and that's where the biggest mortalities are. This is the ICES official report. If you then elaborate that further, I'm not going to go into the detail of this analysis, but basically you're trying to get 40% of eels out to sea, as if on a number based on what it was 100 years ago, 40%. And the 5 worst rivers are these 5, all in France, achieving about 1 to 5%. In spite of having all the eels arriving in France, we have this ridiculously small number escaping. So it is a massive problem, but it's not just a French problem. This has triggered huge reactions in Denmark, Sweden, Netherlands, Germany, saying don't eat eel. So strong is this voice that eel has been withdrawn from the supermarket shelves, believing that that will save the eel. People like myself do not think that will solve the problem. Nobody in our organization of scientists and conservationists believe that will solve the problem. There's already so much illegal trade. It will just go legal. This is a map to symbolize the history and the traditions of the eel culture. Even today, there are tens of thousands of fishermen getting their livelihood. Many of the Mediterranean countries, it's cash and brown paper bags. In Northern Europe, it's glass eels grown on in tanks to feed the market. So, we have a crisis. What are we doing about it? First of all, we're trying to tell the eel story, so I'm particularly grateful to be here today. It's managed to attract a lot of attention as people associate particularly with its extraordinary life cycle. Now, I'm not going to go through the life cycle, but you have an oceanic phase where they breed, and then a continental phase where they're trying to put on weight and then grow up. So the main plan is to try and get more glass eels into fresh water by reducing mortalities and by unlocking the migration pathways. And then we're trying to get more eels to escape to the ocean to get back to breed. So again, we're trying to unblock the migratory pathways and screen the water pumps.
Excuse me, if I could just ask you for one explanation at this point. I think it is crucial, because in Poland we don't know that the eel is from the lakes. We catch it in the lakes and it's big like this, and we smoke it. At which stage is it released there?
Okay.
And where is it caught?
It's caught here at the top there at 12 o'clock as a glass eel, like this.
Next to the British Isles.
Yeah, probably on the River Severn or in the Bay of Biscay. It's then held in tanks for a couple of weeks to rest. Then it's flown or driven in lorries with tanks and air filters to feed the oxygen to them across the continent of Europe and then released in these waters. You also buy eels that have been grown on in eel farms from this big to this big. But that's where yours are predominantly coming from. Does that explain?
Yeah, thank you.
And then they grow up, getting bigger and bigger and bigger till they reach the full size, and then they try and escape. This is typical of what is going on. Lots of engineering solutions to enable the eels to bypass the barriers. Here in the UK, we have already done at least 600 solutions. We're spending 120 million in the next 4 years on another range of solutions to enable them to get in. This is very big work. It's happening elsewhere. Here in France, on the Adour, 50 million has been spent to enable not only eels, but migratory fish like salmon and so on to get up the rivers. In the Netherlands, we saw some of the work from Jane, but here's this roadmap that is being built to try and identify the key blockages where the monies can be channeled so that it can have greatest effect. In Sweden, the beginnings of hydropower stations being modified. You can see this great engineering at the front. If you modify them after you've built them, it costs a lot more than designing the solution in the first place. But there are 25,000 hydropower stations to modify. It's not going to happen quickly. It's going to take years to re-engineer them. Here in Britain, we have 2,000 targeted barriers. This is about putting screening in front of a major water intake to provide the water for London City. This particular water company has a 5-year plan of £35 million to re-engineer all those water intakes. It's big, complex work. So, as an emergency measure, we then have the idea of restocking. So you pay the fishermen to catch the fish, and you then move them over the barriers, both at the baby glass eel stage, and then also as big eels, particularly in the Netherlands, where you've got these great walls trapping fish in the freshwater side of the sea. So they have to be caught, lifted out, and put the other side. This can't be a long-term measure, but because the eel is critically endangered, it's an emergency measure. Here is restocking happening. We are moving about 50 million a year across Europe to try and save. Here is Zoological Society of London. Where are we? Wales. This is the program led by them. They've trained up 500 citizen science. They work with 40 NGO partners, and they are installing migration solutions, but also counting the numbers of eels to give us the information. We are very short of good information about eel and eel numbers. Lots going on. Only very recently have we proved that hydropower is a big killer. And I'm not going to talk you through this slide other than to say in 1986 this was the pattern of mortality in Sweden, and by 2014, this was the pattern in 1986, hydropower being in red, and here is the pattern 2014. Hydropower now being recognized as the biggest killer of eel. This was all lost before. This piece of work is absolutely the foundations of really starting to count the pain that hydro is causing. Satellite tagging is now going on. Big eels are caught, satellite tags put on, and they're tracked out to sea to try and understand their journey. We thought for some time that maybe none got out of the Mediterranean, and it proved they do. Similarly, the Baltic. These are fish, some of them will be yours, from Poland, coming out through the Baltic. We've actually managed to track them as far as the Azores, but nothing to the Sargasso Sea. A big eel has never even been seen in the Sargasso Sea. So it's still full of mystery. Okay, I'm going to skip some of these ones because I feel I've had my time. One of the biggest problems I mentioned was greed and this trafficking of eels to Asia. The market, the total market in Europe is about 30 tons. So you can multiply that by a little over 3. That's the sort of legal market in millions. 3 millions per ton, so something like 100 million. In fact, what's happening is we are catching many more eels than there is demand for. So they're then being trafficked to Asia at huge profits. Last year we reckon every legally caught eel, in a sense, 2 or maybe even 3 went to Asia. Something like 50 to 100 million euros worth. So obviously we're trying to blow the whistle on that trade because it's denuding the European stock. That's enough on that. Okay, now I want to really close down on collaboration, the way ahead. This is a nice drawing showing man trying to save the eel in the sense that it's going to be a very long journey. You can't change hundreds of years of what's gone on in a very short cycle. We have to have consistent policies for some time. This is SEG, the Sustainable Eel Group, meeting in London. It's a mixture of scientists, conservationists, and commercial people, all setting aside their differences to try and work together to find solutions. Collaboration. SEG works with many NGOs, particularly in the UK, where there are very, very good relationships. But building relationships with NGOs in Europe is a key strategy, and hence our close work with Wetlands International European Association. It's really important to us. We have a model for change in that we have a vision here of healthy wild eel populations supporting a sustainable industry, but we can't achieve that without making the industry sustainable at the top and without creating a healthy environment for the eel to operate in. And we can't do either of those without good science and good information. And our job in SEG is to provide the leadership so that all this can happen. Skip that. Yeah, the industry now is increasingly creating funds to pay for this. So every eel eaten in the Netherlands and Germany, €1 a kilo now goes into a stewardship fund, which is paying for science, conservation, and other investments into the future of the eel. For the industry, we have a standard, and the scientists and conservationists will only support the industry where the standard is met. It is not a blank check. They have to participate in and collaborate in a sustainable future. When we make claims for sustainability, they have to be proven and not bogus. Who here drives a Volkswagen?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. The emissions claim, bogus. So you have to prove that your claims are genuine. So we are taking our whole program through a process called ISEAL, which means stakeholders are involved in assessing your claims. Now, there is lots of money from Europe to support the recovery of eel. These are just some of the funds that you are aware of. And the particular fund I want to identify is the Interreg funding stream. And this is a bid that we are on the point of winning. We've had very good feedback to join up the Atlantic countries around eel sustainability, to share best practice, to introduce very sensitive handling techniques to make sure the mortality is minimized. We would like to have similar programs in the Mediterranean and the Baltic, and we are looking for partners to work with us to create it. And that is the end. It's really all about collaboration. Science, conservation, commercial, across all national boundaries. We cannot save the eel without very high levels of collaboration.